Please, the ambassador said, voice quivering through the translator. Don't drag humans into this conflict. The words echoed through the Concord chamber, a cathedral of glass and light built to make war look civilized. Flags of a dozen star nations hovered in holographic silence. Every species present had claws, carapaces, or chitin, every one except the human. Elias Ward sat alone at the end of the crescent table, hands folded, posture relaxed in a way that made everyone uneasy. He wore no medals, no ceremonial armor. Just an old Terran naval coat with the insignia scraped half away, as if it had survived fires that records preferred to forget. Across from him, High Marshal KRTH of the Virex Dominion let out a clicking laugh. You plead like prey, he said, mandibles flexing. The conflict is already decided. The Concord resists inevitable expansion. Humans are irrelevant. Ward raised an eyebrow. That's so? The Virex had been at war for 17 standard cycles. They called it a pacification. Their fleets moved with bureaucratic precision, stripping worlds of resources, glassing population centers that resisted, leaving behind neat casualty figures and sanitized reports. To the Concord, it was annihilation. To the Virex, it was accounting. The human delegate hadn't spoken once during the first 3 hours of debate. That alone had unsettled the room. You lost 12 colonies this quarter, KRRTH continued, projecting a tactical map. Another 5 will fall within the cycle. Your plea to Earth is emotional, not strategic. The ambassador swallowed. Those were civilian worlds. Everything is civilian until it resists. Ward sighed softly, like a man listening to a familiar excuse. You know, he said. Back home, we had a phrase for that. Just following doctrine. KRTH's eyes narrowed. Human history is primitive. Your wars were planetary tantrums. This is galactic reality. Ward leaned back. Funny thing about reality. It doesn't care how big your map is. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Several Concord members shifted uncomfortably. They had begged Earth not to send a military delegate. They had wanted diplomats, economists, mediators. Instead, humanity had sent a retired admiral with a reputation that didn't translate cleanly into alien languages. One of the elder counselors spoke, voice trembling. Admiral Ward, humanity has remained neutral for decades. We respect that choice. But if you enter this war, it will escalate beyond containment. Ward nodded. Correct. That is why we ask, no, we implore, you to remain uninvolved. KRRTH straightened, sensing advantage. The Concord fears you, human. But fear is misplaced. Your species is fragile. Emotion-driven. You will break. Ward smiled. It wasn't kind. Marshal, he said, do you know why humans avoided galactic politics for so long? KRRTH scoffed. Because you were afraid. No, Ward replied. Because we were tired. He tapped a control on the table. The chamber lights dimmed, replaced by a starfield map. Not the Concord's. Humanity's. Red markers dotted the edges of Virex expansion space. These, Ward said, are human-registered trade routes. Medical convoys. Refugee transports. Independent merchants who didn't want anything to do with your pacification. The ambassador's frills stiffened. Those routes were neutral. They were, Ward agreed. Past tense. KRTH's mandibles clicked again, slower this time. If an incident occurred, reparations were issued. Ward's smile vanished. You vaporized a convoy carrying 312 civilians, he said quietly. 2/3 of them were non-combatant dependents. The rest were contract haulers. You sent an apology drone and a crate of ceremonial fruit. To the wrong planet. Silence crushed the chamber. That convoy, Ward continued, included my niece. The translator struggled with the word niece. It finally settled on offspring of sibling bond. The meaning landed like a hammer. KRRTH bristled. Collateral losses. An accounting term. Ward snapped, his voice suddenly sharp enough to cut. Not a moral one. He stood. The human was smaller than every being in the room, but something in his posture made several guards shift their weapons anyway. You want us to stay out of this, Ward said, addressing the chamber now. I understand. Because you've studied our history just enough to be afraid, but not enough to understand why. The starfield shifted again. Ancient human conflicts flashed by, grainy, violent, intimate. Cities burning. Soldiers advancing through mud and ruins. Lines of names carved into stone. We are not the strongest species, Ward said. We're not the smartest. We don't heal the fastest or live the longest. What we are is stubborn. KRRTH snorted. Stubbornness does not win wars. Ward looked directly at him. No. It ends them. He gestured, and the map zoomed out to reveal Virex supply lines, long, bloated chains of logistics hubs, fuel depots, and command nexuses stretching across conquered space. You fight wars like engineers, Ward said. Elegant. Efficient. Predictable. Humans fight wars like survivors. The Concord ambassador whispered. What does that mean? Ward didn't look away from KRRTH. It means we don't aim for victory. We aim for consequences. KRRTH rose to his full height, towering. Is that a threat? Ward considered the question, then shrugged. It's a warning. Threats are loud. Warnings are polite. He reached into his coat and placed a small data wafer on the table. Inside that, he said, is humanity's formal response. We offer one chance for de-escalation. Withdraw from occupied Concord worlds. Submit leadership for tribunal. Return stolen populations. And if we refuse? KRRTH demanded. Ward picked up his coat. Then you will learn, he said calmly. Why every human myth about monsters ends with the line and then it got worse. The ambassador's voice cracked. Admiral, please. Ward paused at the doorway and looked back, eyes tired, not angry. We didn't come looking for this, he said. But you should know something about humans. He tapped his chest once. We don't do halfway measures when family is involved. He left the chamber in silence. Behind him, the Concord sat frozen, some in relief, others in terror. And for the first time in 17 cycles, the Virex Dominion felt something unfamiliar coil in its collective mind. Not fear. Dread. The first human ship arrived alone. No escort. No formation. No fanfare. Just a rust-red cruiser drifting at the edge of the Virex blockade, broadcasting on all open frequencies. This is the TSS Old Man's Debt, came a lazy, disarming voice. We're here to negotiate. The Virex laughed. They expected humans to arrive trembling, begging for mercy. They expected diplomacy wrapped in fear. Instead, they got audacity. And then they fired. All at once. Lasers, missiles, torpedoes, everything in their arsenal, and the human cruiser didn't even flinch. It didn't maneuver. It didn't defend. It simply disappeared. Or so it seemed. Seconds later, fragments of the ship erupted from hyperspace like shards of lethal glass. Each piece accelerated with terrifying precision, smashing into the Virex hulls at relativistic speeds. Plasma and armor twisted together in violent symmetry. The blockade screamed in silence. Systems overloaded. Command networks melted like wax. The humans hadn't attacked. They had rewritten the rules. The Concorde received a single, stark transmission shortly afterward. We are now involved. Please stand by. Weeks passed. The Virex regrouped, furious but overconfident. They outnumbered humanity by 100 to 1, and they believed that sheer scale would crush the Terran threat. They were wrong. Supply depots vanished. Not explosions, not scorched rubble, but total erasure. Moons hollowed themselves from the inside out. Fuel worlds cracked and spilled into their suns. Communication relays whispered one last word before going dark. Human laughter, distorted and casual. No one could find them. Not fleets, not scouts, not psychic probes. Humanity had become the shadow in the machine, untouchable, unpredictable. And then the humans appeared, not in fleets, but in small teams, unmarked ships landing quietly on Virex-occupied planets. No bombardments, no war cries. Just humans with rifles, tools, and patience. They didn't fight armies. They dismantled the logistics of war. They poisoned supply chains, liberated imprisoned populations, and left precise, devastating notes carved into the Virex installations. You glass cities. We dismantle systems. When a Virex commander was captured alive, he was returned 3 days later, stripped of all rank insignia, blind, missing his mandibles, and bearing the same message carved into his chest plate. The Concorde watched, horrified. The humans did not negotiate. They did not boast. They did not retreat. They simply enforced a methodical, relentless justice that the Virex had not accounted for. Broadcasts began appearing in open channels, war reports in a tone so calm, so procedural, that it made the Virex recoil in disbelief. This is Captain Ruiz. If you're hearing this, you were important. Congratulations. That was your last promotion. Another. Dear Dominion citizens, your leaders said humans are weak. They lied. Please direct complaints to remaining heads of state. Even the Concorde began to plead. Enough! They transmitted. Stop. This is escalation. Ward's response came in a single line, direct, devoid of flair. We tried peace. You tried patience. They tried genocide. Now we try something older. The older strategies were brutal, surgical, and terrifyingly effective. They were the strategies humanity had inherited from every war they had ever lost, every occupation they had endured, every corner of their planet scorched and survived. Virex fleets began to fracture under the invisible hand of human tactics. Every supply line crippled. Every reinforcement delayed. Every morale center infiltrated. And still, no human fleet engaged in head-on combat. They didn't need to. The first real battle came when the Virex, furious beyond reason, attempted to ambush a human convoy. It wasn't a convoy. It was a trap. And the humans didn't die. They executed the Virex plan against them with clinical precision, turning ambush into slaughter, leaving the Virex fleet dismembered, retreating, and utterly demoralized. By the time the Concorde realized what had happened, the galaxy had learned an uncomfortable truth about humanity. They were not predictable. They were not conventional. And when cornered, they did not fight to win, they fought to end the possibility of being cornered again. Every world the Virex had conquered trembled as humans appeared, unannounced, unstoppable, and unsentimental. The war had escalated. But it wasn't the humans who had started it. It was the Virex who had invited a species that knew no fear, no surrender, and no halfway measures into the conflict. And now, the entire Dominion would learn why human myths always ended with a line, and then it got worse. The Virex made their last mistake at Caro's gate. They ambushed a human convoy, or so they thought. In reality, it was a wedding. 2 human traders, separated by politics and distance, had fallen in love despite the war. Their ships carried family, friends, children, and music. The Virex obliterated it without hesitation. The Concorde received transmissions of screams and static. By the time the human response arrived, it wasn't human anymore. It was something older, something colder, and infinitely patient. Vendetta, a word the galaxy would soon learn to fear, was not a promise. It was a methodology. The first wave of human fleets arrived at Caro's gate days later. They weren't sleek or elegant. They were dense, ugly, layered, and resilient. Armor patched over armor, systems jury-rigged, weapons brutal in simplicity. They moved like storms, slow, inevitable, unstoppable. They did not broadcast warnings. They broadcast names. Every human casualty, every destroyed ship, every murdered civilian scrolled across Virex channels like a ledger of vengeance. No commentary. No music. Just accounting. The Virex admiral, a veteran of 1,000 campaigns, opened hailing frequencies. Human! Cease this madness. This escalation ensures mutual annihilation. A cigarette glowed between Ward's fingers. He exhaled smoke lazily. No, he said, voice calm and deliberate. This ensures memory. The battle was obscene. Humans rammed carriers after emptying magazines. Boarding torpedoes punched through hulls, releasing Marines who fought room to room with grim efficiency and a sense of dark humor. Clear left. Clear right. Hey, this one's still twitching, double tap. The Virex had never seen soldiers fight after losing command, air support, and hope, and continue anyway. Their coordinated fleets crumbled in disarray. Even when surrounded, humans adapted instantly, improvising tactics the Virex couldn't anticipate. When Caro's Gate finally fell, Ward ordered a ceasefire. The remaining Virex ships powered down. Silence stretched across the debris field, broken only by the faint static of hailing frequencies. KRRTH was brought aboard Ward's flagship. Shackled, furious, terrified, the High Marshal spat venom at the human. You've won! Finish it! And us! Ward shook his head. No. We're not like you. He leaned close, eyes cold. We're worse in one specific way. The Virex Dominion wasn't destroyed. It was dismantled. Every world they had conquered was freed. Systems once stripped of resources were restored. Subject species were armed, educated, and taught to remember exactly who had ruled them. Virex leadership was left alive, stripped of power, to watch tribunals broadcast across the galaxy. Humans did not execute them. They did not annihilate them. They retired them, to obscurity, to boredom, to irrelevance. Every action carried precision, morality, and poetic irony. The galaxy learned quickly, humans didn't escalate wars to conquer. They escalated wars to enforce consequences. They didn't fight to win battles, they fought to ensure their enemy never underestimated them again. As the last Virex warship powered down, Ward spoke over the open comms. Let this be a lesson. When you attack innocents, you don't just fight humans. You awaken them. And when awakened, humans remember. The galaxy went silent. For the first time in decades, no empire moved without hesitation. Borders stabilized not out of treaties or fear, but because every species remembered what happened to those who underestimated humanity. And somewhere in the quiet corners of space, the phrase whispered among generals, diplomats, and spies alike. Do not drag humans into your conflict. Because once humans were involved, wars didn't escalate, they concluded. And the conclusion was always absolute. Years later, the Concord rebuilt itself. Borders stabilized. Treaties were signed. Economies reopened. But every single agreement carried one clause, repeated like a prayer. Humans shall not be involved. Elias Ward returned to Earth quietly, to a small coastal town where the ocean tasted of salt and old memories. His house smelled of books and rusted metal, the kind of place a man carries in his mind long after he leaves battlefields behind. A Concord journalist found him one evening, a hollow recorder trembling in her hands. Admiral Ward, she asked, do you regret it? The scale of destruction, the lives lost? Ward looked out at the horizon, the sun dissolving into the water like spilled molten gold. We didn't start that war, he said, voice soft, carrying the weight of countless lives. We ended a habit. She pressed. Humanity could have ruled the galaxy. After what you did, no one could have stopped you. Ward smiled faintly, a ghost of the humor that had haunted Virex fleets. Ruling, he said slowly, means waking up every day to manage other people's messes. We already tried that once, on our own planet. Didn't go so well. The journalist tilted her head. And if another empire makes the same mistake? If someone provokes humanity again? Ward's eyes, gray and sharp, scanned the stars above. Then I hope someone remembers the first thing the Concord said when they begged us to stay out. He exhaled, calm, steady, the weight of his species' history behind every word. Please, don't drag humans into this conflict. Because once humanity was involved, wars didn't escalate. They concluded. And in their conclusion, the galaxy learned a universal truth. Humans were not the strongest. They were not the fastest, nor the smartest. But when pushed far enough, cornered beyond mercy, and forced to watch innocents die, humans became the reckoning. And reckoning, Ward thought as he lit a cigarette and watched the waves, was far more terrifying than any fleet, any weapon, any empire could imagine. Behind him, Earth remained quiet. Simple. Unassuming. And yet, somewhere out in the stars, the name Ward carried weight enough to halt entire campaigns, to make warlords reconsider every strategy, to remind all that humans didn't just fight, they remembered, and when they remembered, the universe itself paid attention. Because humans didn't just take part in war. Humans concluded it. And the galaxy would never forget.